and my Dutch name was Greenwood, and was born in a fairly large town called Eindhoven, an industrial town. It's mostly known for the Philips factories. There was the Norelco here. And life in Holland, especially in a town like that, was different from what we have here in America. We had a real small town atmosphere, narrow streets, small houses, and it was a very almost primitive life. We still was the time when they had washing machines that you have done by hand, and wringers were done by hand. And when I was young, I was always sitting outside on the stoop and waiting for the delivery men to come, the horse and wagons for vegetables and fruit. A real small town, old-fashioned atmosphere. And my family was consisted of my father and mother and 2 brothers. I was the youngest one in the family. And it was a very happy family. It was just a normal, no problems at all that we faced till the war broke out. We had no real problems with anti-Semitism. We lived in the southern part of Holland, which was mostly Catholic, and we had a good relationship with our neighbors. The community, the Jewish community at that time was about 700 people living in Eindhoven. I had a feeling that they were all family because everybody we called either oom, which means uncle, or tante, that means aunt. And so to me it was like the whole Jewish community was one family. Later I found out that very few of them were actually related to us. On May 1940, Holland was invaded by the Germans, and immediately became a very difficult time. There wasn't much fighting going on because they flew with their Stuka airplanes across Holland and destroyed one major city, Rotterdam, and threatened to destroy Amsterdam if we wouldn't capitulate. So the government capitulated 5 days later. And one of the first traumatic things that I remember from that time, I was 10 years old then, was when the German army marched through our hometown. They came with big bravado, a lot of noise. They had motorcycles at front, and the officers were in big cars, and the soldiers marched behind it, and they had metal tabs on the shoes. So when they marched in front of our house, it was very noisy, very loud, very threatening. We already were hiding behind the curtains and drapes because we already heard the bad news from our German friends that came, refugees that came to our house, what had happened in Germany and Austria. And so we were very, very, very worried what would happen to us. And to see that enormous army passing in front of our house is something that is engraved in my mind. I'll never forget. And after that, the next day, the first time we went out, we stayed in the house for the rest of the day, but the next day we went out, and we went to a family, like I said, I thought it was my family. We called her Tante Roos. Tante Roos Kool was her name. And it was right down the street, and we stayed with her overnight. We were so worried. We wanted to have some people to talk to and give us support. So we stayed with them overnight, and then the next day we went back to our house. And then already walking out of the street, we felt different. We felt threatened. We felt very uncomfortable walking in the street, and very self-conscious of the fact that we were Jewish and maybe not the same as everybody else. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. And then a life started that we tried to go back to a normal life, but every time it was a different restriction. So at one time we weren't allowed to go to the parks, and another time people were fired from their jobs, and another time things were taken, privileges were, movie houses were restricted. We were not allowed to go to movie houses. Every time it was more difficult for us to live a normal life. And then in 1941, they made, we had to wear the star. I think it was 42. 1941, we weren't allowed to go to regular schools. I was 11 years old.
That's just the Jewish children?
The children, right. Yeah, the Jewish children.
And how old were you at that time?
11 years
11.
old. Okay. And we were not allowed to go to the regular schools. We had to go to special schools. We had to get up early in the morning and go on a train about 40 kilometers from Eindhoven. We had a school especially for Jewish children. So then we got news that people were being picked up and taken to camps. They were called work camps. And we volunteered to make duffel bags for them and blankets for them and sent them off with that. And then something terrible happened because little by little in our in our classrooms, children would disappear. Our schoolmates were disappearing. The classes became smaller and smaller. It was very, very worrying to us. Sometime in 1942, they had that meeting, I think it was February 42, Wannsee, when the Germans decided about the final solution for the Jewish problem, which meant that they would have an organized way of transporting as many people as possible to the camps and killing them as efficiently as they could. So we were very worried about we would be next to be picked up. We heard about people being picked up in Amsterdam. We had family in Amsterdam. We were worried about them. And then we had to wear the star, and it was another uncomfortable experience, of course, because now we stood out in the population, general population, and mostly people were supportive of us. They would say, wear it with pride, but we didn't feel that way personally. We felt we were set apart. And then, that was in February 42, with the star. Then we had a friend of the family. He came to the house and talked to my mother. And he was a Catholic person. And he said to my mother, get your family ready, because at one point or another you'll have to go away. Otherwise you're going to get picked up and go to concentration camps.
Did you know what they were going to, what was happening in the concentration camps? Were you aware?
We didn't know exactly, but we had a feeling because we didn't hear any news from the people that went. And we know already some people in our hometown, and like I said, the children in school that disappeared, and we never heard from them. So we were concerned. And the refugees from Germany, they told us that things that were happening.
They told you that they were murdered.
That people that were tortured and murdered and mistreated very badly. So that gentleman we called Oom Michel, and it was around September. Things getting worse all the time. More and more people disappeared, and we had a special way of when people would visit us, they would knock on the door, a certain sign on the door, so we knew who they were, because we were worried to let people in. Then about October, beginning of October, Oom Michel came to the house in the evening, and he told us, get your little suitcase ready, and put a couple of pieces of clothing in, change of underwear, and toothbrush, whatever you need, maybe take a book along or something. You have to go. I don't know how he knew it. I have no idea how he knew it, but he told us you have to go. So here I was 12 years old then, and I said goodbye to my mother and my two brothers, My father had died a year before, natural death. And I was the first one to leave the house. So I don't know, at that time I didn't know what happened to my mother and my two brothers. And Uncle Michel he took me in the back of the bicycle and he took me to the first address, and I was introduced to a family, and he said you're going to spend time with them, and I had to behave and do whatever they would tell me to do, and not give him a hard time. And they had to stay indoors, of course, and they would stay out of sight. And people were very nice to me, and they were very nice to me. And for the next 2 years, I actually had 14 different addresses, and some of them I just went one time. So 14 different families hid me. I was in hiding with them during those 2 years, from October 42 till end of September 44. And some people went 2 or 3 times, some people went more times. But altogether 14 different addresses, and every 2 or 3 weeks old Michel would come over and pick me up on the back of a bicycle. He would take me to a different place. And it was a scary time for me because I would be exposed then, because the rest of the time I was sitting indoors, basically not doing very much. And he risked his life doing this, and would early in the morning would go before it was daylight. One time we had a real scary incident. A German soldier was actually almost in the way where we were going, and he stopped us, and Uncle Michel told me, don't say a word, I'll talk to him, I know German, you don't say a word, even if he talks, you don't say a word. So he talked to him, and then the German soldier let us go. So it was very upsetting, but nothing happened, thank God. And so that's how I spent my 2 years of my time in the war. He would have contact with my mother and my brothers. My oldest brother he didn't come back from the war. We don't know exactly what happened to him. We never found out exactly. Nobody wants to talk about it, but he never came back. I mean, he was not in a concentration camp, that we know, but we don't know what happened to him. My mother, I found out later, Michel took her to a different town, to Den Haag, and she had false papers and lived like a free person. She had a different name and the false papers, lived with her family. And my middle brother, he lived in a farm, also with false papers. So they were both free during that time. But I was indoors, and sometimes it was upstairs in the bedroom, or sometimes in the attic. And every house I was taken to, I was told if anything would happen, how I needed to escape. I was never very athletic, so I was worried about it. They just told me, you know, you get out of this window and you jump down on the gutter, and they jump down on a little shed or something, jump down to the street and run out in the alley, and don't go anywhere to anybody you know till about a week later. You know? So I was worried that I had to do that because I was not athletic at all. I don't think I could have done it. So one night a car stopped in front of our house, and I heard 2 German soldiers talking, and I was really worried. I was almost ready to jump out of the window, and I'm glad I didn't, because they were just dropping somebody off and they left. It was a very scary moment. Then in 1944, I was liberated. Eindhoven was liberated, and that was an amazing time, just an amazing time. We heard about the news, we followed the invasion in France, and the way the army went through France and Belgium, and about 2 weeks before we were liberated, they were at the border of Belgium. They were held back. They couldn't cross a certain river, but we knew they were close. It was only about 20 miles away from us. So then the day came, and we could hear the army approaching our hometown. It was an army of enormous tanks and a very large army. And the amazing thing was, they went on one street, one highway. The highways weren't very large, not like the freeways here. It was just a 2-lane, 2.5-lane highway. And an enormous army went on that one road right through the center of Eindhoven, and then north to Arnhem, where they were stopped for a half year. And when I was told I was allowed to go out of the house, I was really worried. I didn't know whether I should go or not. Maybe something would go wrong and the Germans would come back. They said, no, it's okay to go now. So I walked and I walked and I walked, and I met the army, and I went, as the army went north, I walked south and met the soldiers and waved at them, and they gave me candy and what have you. And the problem was that I was walking and walking. I don't know how many miles I walked, and seeing that enormous army and seeing all these people, the soldiers and everything. I hadn't walked for 2 years. So all of a sudden I felt some pain in my foot, and I looked, and my foot was all bloody from a blister that opened up. So I sat down for a while, and I had to walk back. I don't know how far it was, but probably a couple of miles. I had to walk back. I was in trouble getting home. Got home late in the evening. People were worried that maybe I got lost or something. People took care of me. So the next day, they told me go across the street, because the army had was a brick factory. There was a large space there, and the army had made a base there. It was mostly British soldiers. And they said, go across the street and see if you can get some help and get some medication for your food. So I went across the street, and they adopted me. They gave me all kinds of food and candy, and they took care of my wound and everything. And every day I went there, I spent practically the whole day there. They treated me really well. So that's how I got liberated. My mother was in The Hague, and also my brother, who was with the farms. They didn't get liberated till more than a half year later, in May 1945, when the war was over. And we didn't get reunited till sometime after that, a few weeks after that. And it was also very, very difficult, because I had changed a lot. I was a pretty heavy young boy when I went to hiding at age 12, and at 14 I was skinny, and I had kind of a wild hair, and I had a beard, and I had wear glasses. I looked entirely different, and my mother met my mother at the railway station. She didn't recognize me, but then we got together, and then we had a time to recover and come back to a normal life, and that took some time. We were lucky. We had a friend who had a studio. He was an artist, but the studio was in a garage. It was a small garage. And he gave that studio to us because we had no house, we had no furniture, we had nothing. We weren't poor, we just had nothing. And we stayed for a half year in the garage. There was a little sink there, but no furniture. We had just a couple of crates and a metal frame for a bed, and no mattress on it, just a blanket on it, very uncomfortable. And here my mother and 2 teenage sons lived for a half year. It was very difficult.
Did you have toilets?
I don't remember that, you know. People ask me that, and I don't remember. I think we went. I don't think so. I think we went to the house for the toilet, but I don't remember. I think we had bigger problems to worry about.
I'm sure.
We had to go back to school. Oh, I forgot to tell you that we had a lady, Mrs. Timberger. Mrs. Timberger was a German teacher. She was a wonderful woman, and she risked her life during the war. She came to the houses where I was hiding, and gave me homework, gave me work to do, and all the different subjects that you need to know for high school. And when I came after the war to go back to school, even though I lost 2 years, I always only was 1 year behind. Mm-hmm. So because of the work that she did, I didn't lose too much time. And she was a wonderful woman. And so little by little, we had no clothing. My mother got some things from different people, and she sewed things together. And after a while, it looked halfway decent. And then came a time that the people that had big houses, the government made them take people in that didn't have houses. So we went to upstairs of a family that had a large house. And little by little things got better. And it took a good few years that I felt comfortable. I had a problem with an inferiority complex as a teenager. I had trouble communicating with my peers, especially the male the boys, because while I was hiding, the only contact I had mostly was with the women of the house. The men were working and during the day, and if I had any contact at all, it was usually just with the women. Usually when the men came home and the children, if there were children in the house, came home, I had to go to my room or the attic or wherever I was. So I had trouble communicating with people for a long time. But we came over that, and I have to say that except for this period of my life, it was difficult, I had a good life, so I don't want to dwell on that alone. That's all I want to say right now.
That's it.